to Like Maria, and today we're going to be talking about Shakespeare a bit more, and Maria's going to talk to us about how to start off with Shakespeare. So Maria, I'm a complete novice. I've never read any Shakespeare ever before. How do I start off? What do I do first?
Well, that's a really good question, Caroline, because lots of people find this experience quite daunting, and quite frankly, it needn't be. One of the key things is to pick the right text. So if you go into a bookshop, there'll be a massive range, but you want to listen to your teacher or have a Google first and find out the range of texts that are available. So some people like to start off with really basic text and what we call an on-fast translation. Not really a translation, but it's a version, a modern English version of the older text. And that can be really helpful to get to grips with the plot. So when you come to a passage that you're not sure about, you can look across the page and it's written out in modern English for you. So that's a really good start. If you've got a little bit more experience in reading plays and you're quite confident with your English, well, then you could step up to one of the school editions, which don't have this kind of translation or version, but they do have lots of helpful notes. And I would recommend getting an edition where the notes are actually on the page, so you don't have to be shuffling to the back. You know, we can leave those editions for academic study at university. The other thing I would really say is don't be thinking that you're going to read all of the play like you might read a good story or a good novel. We don't study Shakespeare like that. You want to tackle key scenes, and absolutely go and watch the film first. Do a lot of Googling, find out about the plot. Reading Shakespeare isn't a page-turning experience, because after all, these plays were written to be acted out on stage, and that was the key performance. So go to the performance first, then come back, settle down with your text, and have the film running if necessary in front of you. There are many versions out there, lots of versions available on YouTube. So whatever your text, be prepared to work hard at it, but use the wealth of materials that are available to you.
Yeah, as you say, there are lots of materials there. I don't know if those materials really deal with the big problem, which is the language. The language of Shakespeare is really difficult, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think we have to be upfront about this and say it's difficult, particularly if you're a teenager studying it for the first time. Firstly, Shakespeare wrote his plays in poetry. So all of a sudden we are moved not just into a world of language that we are unfamiliar with because it's 400 years old, but also he's writing in poetry in a way people wouldn't have spoken in poetry in normal settings. So it's a very, we might say, rarefied language in some ways. And of course, the time difference, we struggle with that. But the thing is to chip away at it. So take small sections, maybe 10, 20 lines at a sitting, read it out loud to yourself, listen to the way it sounds, use the notes in your text, and listen to somebody else reading it as well, and try and work out the general meaning. Of course, the richness in this language comes from specific detail and in particular imagery. So if you can get a handle on the imagery, the pictures that Shakespeare is painting in your mind. So for example, in Hamlet, he talks about Denmark being like an unweeded garden. Throughout the rest of the play, then there are suggestions of weeds and disease and problematic circumstances all feed into this imagery of something being corrupted. So if you can kind of get a handle on some initial pointers with that, and your teacher will help with that, or the textual notes, or just simply, doing some Googling and finding out about imagery in the play, you'll have a little way in there.
That's really useful to know. And you mentioned about Hamlet being set in Denmark. How important is it for us to know where the plays are set and to sort of understand the family trees and things like that?
Absolutely. You need to do a little bit of research. I mean, each play has its own context, its own names, which are sometimes quite difficult for us even to spell and remember, and certainly to pronounce. So you're jumping from Italy to Denmark to historical settings. And it's a really good tip there that you've lighted upon. I always, when I'm teaching, and even for my own benefit, if I'm reading a new Shakespeare play myself to study, I will do a family tree. I will work out the relationships. And often in these plays, I mean, Romeo and Juliet is your classic. There are two camps, one side against another side. And it's really important to kind of have that in your head. And so that when you know that someone's speaking, which side and what their attitudes are likely to be, and that helps very much. Of course, one needs to know a little bit about the customs and the setting. So if, for example, you're reading Julius Caesar or one of those classical plays, you find out a little bit about the history. Antony and Cleopatra, another one, find out about the history surrounding them. If you're going to look at Henry V, well, find out about Agincourt and the battles and the problems, the political problems that were of that era, and that helps greatly.
Yeah, and you said a little bit before about watching the film and so on. So would you recommend that students kind of get an overview of the play before they even look at the text itself? Is it important to sort of have an understanding of the story?
I would say it absolutely is. Either read a synopsis, look at one of these Shakespeare shorts. There's plenty out there, sort of from cartoons, animations, kind of talk throughs on YouTube as well. Watch one of those, but actually watching the whole film, as I've said, it's not going to be a page turner. You know, we all know that Macbeth dies in the end. It's not a big surprise to us, really. So it's not that sort of theatrical experience, really. You know, when we pick up a book and we know it's a tragedy, for example, we know that there's going to be death at the end. So I think we ought to read these in a different way, not expect to be reading them. After all, these plays were written and performed in an era where people didn't have novels to read. The concept of the novel was actually not invented till much later. People read letters, diaries, histories. But most people weren't readers even. So they were going to the theatre to experience a story. So, you know, we are asking students to study these on a text on the page in front of them, or these days the screen in front of them. It's a big ask. And, you know, anyone that starts looking at Shakespeare and reading Shakespeare should be commended for their efforts and their sort of tenacity, really.
They are fantastic plays that obviously have stood the test of time. Is there any play that you would recommend starting off with, or just general recommendations really that you think students will enjoy?
Well, you know, there's a reason why Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet are taught at secondary school level. And I would say, actually, I have a very soft spot for Romeo and Juliet. I think it's a great introduction to Shakespearean drama. It's a cracking story. It's been reproduced many, many times. Of course, Shakespeare wasn't the first to tell it. He's copied it. So, you know, it's a great love story. It's there in cultural reference all the time. So I'd go for Romeo and Juliet, really. And it is short enough. And you know, there's so many resources out there that I think that's a good one. There's lots of great imagery, and just it's an accessible one. As I said, there's a reason why we introduce students to that at a very early age.
Absolutely. And again, it's some fantastic film adaptations.
Absolutely.
To dive in with that. Okay, well, I think that's it, unless there's anything else you wanted to add. I think there's some great tips there for how to get started, and essentially not be put off by the language or the kind of name Shakespeare, which can sound a bit scary when you're first beginning. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just really to say enjoy it. Have fun, enjoy it. And as I've said, lift it off the page in as many different ways as you can.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Maria. And thank you for watching. And please subscribe if you've enjoyed this content. More coming soon. Bye for now.